welcome to my channel. Today we're talking about a very simple costume craft that you can make for your kids. I just made a very simple fleece base, then my daughter can change out the ears and the tails to make different animals. So I made 3 different animals: a sweet little mouse, a funny bunny, and a cute cat. So she can play pretend with these dress-up clothes, but also it'll pull double duty this Halloween because she could pick one of them to be this Halloween as well. And if you wanted to dress up with your kids, just grab one of the headbands and a gray sweatshirt and you can go out as one of these animals as well. So it was a very simple project to make. Let me show you how easy it was. To create the base, I used fleece fabric, buttons, a vintage bed sheet with a floral pattern on it, scissors and needle and thread, plus a sewing machine. I used one of my daughter's coats as a general template for how big to cut the fabric, and I just cut a very large rectangle that I folded in half, and the folded edge was the top. I used a straight edge and chalk to draw stitching lines down the sides. And using a template that I created, I just drew some armholes that I cut out before I sewed down the sides. I like fleece fabric because you don't have to finish the edges. It's great for a no-sew idea. However, after I sewed down the sides, I did decide to go over the edges with a zigzag stitch just to finish it off and make it a little sturdier for my toddler. For the neck opening, I just used a straight edge to create a line and cut open a hole for the neck. It was very simple. I turned the piece right side out and then cleaned up the edges at the bottom for the hem. On the back of the piece, I sewed 2 buttons together, one small white one on the inside and a large gray one on the outside. I did this to hold the tail, which you'll see in a few minutes. To add a little detail to the costume, and because I love this vintage fabric, I decided to add a little area for the animal's tummy. I created an oval template and traced it out onto the fabric. If your fabric easily frays, one thing you can do is put a thin layer of decoupage on top of it, allow that to dry, and then you can cut it easily. On the back of my cutout, I put a thin layer of fabric Mod Podge and then placed it in the center of my gray fleece base. Oh, and I meant to do this before I started, but put a little piece of wax paper between the fabric pieces so you don't get any decoupage on the back. Once the glue started to dry, I put another layer or 2 of decoupage on top of the fabric, and this helped seal down the edges around the fabric piece. While that dries, let's talk about how to make 2 cute little tails. For the cat and the mouse tail, I used a piece of floral fabric in a rectangular shape, some gray felt, scissors, polyfill, cording, and right side together I just folded the long rectangle in half and sewed along 2 sides to create a tube. I trimmed the edges and turned it right side out. I filled the tube with stuffing, and to give it a little more life and bendability, I decided to put a piece of wire in the middle of the tail, and I just wrapped it in duct tape to keep it from poking through the fabric. I flipped the unfinished open ends inside the tube and slipped a loop of elastic inside as well, and wrapped the edges with a gray felt. I ran a few stitches over that felt to finish the tail off. To make the bunny tail, I used more elastic cording, some yarn, and a long piece of cardboard, and some scissors. This is my favorite way to make pom-poms in general. You just take a long piece of cardboard and keep wrapping and wrapping and wrapping the yarn around it. The more yarn you use, the fuller the tail will be. Okay, and this is the fun part. Fold the cardboard in half really well and slip your cording through the hole between the yarn and the cardboard. You may need to fold the cardboard a little bit more, but you're basically going to pull the cardboard out of the yarn and tie off the cording around the yarn loops. Tie the cording tight and then use your scissors to cut open all of those loops. This is where the pom-pom comes into shape. And what you'll do is just give it a little bit of a haircut to make it into a nice tight pom-pom. I used a little piece of felt that I folded in half and glued down the cording to the inside of the flap and created a little loop with the cording and glued that down. You don't need to do this, but I glued the felt down and added another larger piece of felt to the back just so that the tail sat a little flatter against the costume. And with one quick little change, this costume goes from mouse tail to bunny tail very quickly. And now it's time to make the final part of the costume, the 3 sets of ears. You'll need headbands, some stiff gray felt, more vintage fabric or any other floral fabric you like, leftover fleece fabric, some paper for templates, a pen to trace and scissors to cut, more fabric Mod Podge, hot glue, and a paintbrush. For each animal, I traced out a shape of the ear, cut it out, traced that, and then drew a smaller version of that for the inset for each ear. If you are interested in the shapes I'm using, I will create a template that you can print for free on my blog post this week, so be sure to check that out. I took my 2 paper shapes and used the large one and traced it out onto the gray felt, making sure to trace the mirror image so that the ears looked right once they were on the headband. That point is not as important with the felt since it's reversible, but it's very important when we get to the floral fabric. So I used the smaller version of the ear shape on the floral fabric and traced out 2 mirror images and cut those out. I used more fabric Mod Podge and brushed a thin layer onto the floral fabric and placed it down on the ears. I added another coat of decoupage on top to help seal everything down. And I repeated this entire process with the other 2 animal shapes, the bunny ears and the mouse ears. If you are interested in the shapes I'm using, I've created a free downloadable template so you can use these shapes as well. Just go to my blog post this week and I'll post it there. To attach the ears to the headbands, I cut 2 slits in the bottom of each earpiece to create 3 tabs, and then glued those tabs around the top of the headbands, very carefully with hot glue. I repeated the process for the other 2 animal ears. Then I took strips of gray fleece and using hot glue attached them to the front of each headband, wrapping around the headband at first in the front, trimming around the back, in particular trimming little spots to flap over the ear areas. And then once all that was glued down, I trimmed and kept gluing till it looked right. And I repeated the process with the other 2 animal ears. And now we have 3 different animals my daughter can be: a cat, a mouse, or a bunny.
I can't wait to play with these different clothes with my daughter. They're really adorable and I love the vintage touches. And if you didn't want to sew for this project, and mind you, there's very little sewing to begin with, but if you didn't want to sew, you could just grab a gray t-shirt and use that as your base for making these costumes. So if you like this project, and I hope you do, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more creative and rosy ideas on this channel. Thanks so much for watching.
Oh, not this.
Racist. Ugh.